Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris O'Cole. I'm the restaurant analyst here at KeyBanc. Welcome to the panel on how to use data to transform your business. So I'd like to start just by making an initial introduction, and then I'll ask folks to give you a little more detail about their business. But next to me, we have Mike Lukianoff. Mike is with Fishbowl Analytics. Then we have Alexei Agrachev. Close enough. With Retail Next. And then we have Austin Muehlender with Ziosk and Chet Kapoor with Apogee. And so, and Josh Beck and with Pacific Crest KeyBanc. So, Mike, let me start with you, and you can just give a little bit more detail about your business.
Sure. I've been doing restaurant analytics for about 15 years, and really what we do is taking the data, the point of sale data, and trade area data and so forth, analyze it and help restaurateurs make better decisions about pricing, promotional optimization, really, a broad spectrum. We work with, over the years, I've worked really in all spectrums of the restaurant industry, from high-end steakhouses like Ruth's Chris to Burger King, Del Taco, Pollo Loco, and a pretty broad spectrum in between.
So I'm Alexei with Retail Next, and we are a Silicon Valley-based technology company that's 100% focused on helping brick-and-mortar retailers measure and improve their in-store experience. So we don't work with restaurants, but we work with specialty department, hard goods, some full malls, grocery stores, drugstores, convenience stores, and we put in systems in stores that automatically capture a ton of information about how many customers come in, a lot about who they are, where they came from, how they shop the stores, where they go, what merchandise they interact with, whether they visit fitting rooms or talk to sales associates, how they convert, and really a lot of analytics on how do you use that data to make kind of day-to-day decisions about improving your in-store experience. The company is about 8 years old. We started in 2007. We work with a few hundred large kind of global brands, tens of thousands of locations around the world, and we see probably well north of 10 billion shopping visits kind of annually. So lots of rich data about in-store consumer behavior. Yeah.
My name's Austin Muehlender. I'm with Ziosk. Ziosk is focused on trying to transform the guest experience, in seated dining, particularly casual dining. You may have seen us in Olive Garden, in Red Robin, or in Chili's. We bring multiple benefits to the restaurant. The primary benefit we're trying to bring is to the guest. We're trying to give the guest more control of the experience and to give them the opportunity for entertainment. The ultimate output of what we do is restaurant business performance. It's a more frequent guest, it's higher traffic, it's higher check, it's higher overall revenues, and there's a whole series of impacts that we can have on costs. I've been having this conversation for some years now, and for some years I was saying, one day we will, and now I can say we have 170,000 screens deployed in nearly 3,000 restaurants. The Ziosk network will be exposed to 700 million guests in the next 12 months just from the base. So it's real. We've passed what I would say the early adopter phase. We're in the early majority phase, and it's fun to be on a rocket ship.
Chet Kapoor with Apogee, technology company, horizontal, not specific to a industry, very much in the infrastructure, and analytics space. I think devices have changed our lives. They haven't changed the way our businesses run. All businesses have a system of record that doesn't move as fast as the App Store pace, and you need technology that actually abstracts the old systems so that they can be exposed to be app-enabled. We do that for close to 250 customers worldwide. We process about close to 40 billion API calls in our cloud on a regular basis. Our customers are folks like Target, AT&T, and many others. Just recently, to give you some stats, we ran the Black Friday period for 5 out of the top 10 retailers in this country. Our peak traffic was 50,000 transactions per second. To give you a sense, that's about 3 times what Twitter does. So large amounts of traffic being done through us. We're We recently went public, just reported 50% year-over-year growth, and marching well towards being profitable with having leverage in the business.
Thanks, everyone. So I'll start off and ask a few questions, and then I'll turn it over to Josh, and he'll have some more. Mike, my first question is for you. Big data seems to mean different things to people. I've heard some executives use it to describe just their unstructured data that they're collecting, and then I've heard some use it in reference to the variety and the volume of data that they have that they feel like can really transform or provide them with a competitive advantage. In order just to bring clarification to our discussion today, can you help us or tell us what the term big data means?
Sure, and I think when you talk about say breadth of data and unstructured data, that's typically what people are talking about. I would say that while big data as a concept, I think has been like overhyped as a word, but the promise I think of what it delivers in terms of its advantages to research and understanding customers and so on and so forth can't be overstated. Right? I think that now I think that we're going to hear a lot of big data disaster stories because people went and invested in some infrastructure, some big ways to contain the data and hold it, but they don't start off with the important business question that they're trying to solve. And I think that as we look throughout business communities and we say, well, what's the pain point that you're trying to solve for, and then how do we make sure that we're setting up the data to be able to answer that? I think that there's a lot of me too in a lot of industries. They say, yo, you've got the app, they've got the app, they've got this, they've got that, and then people just get on board, but it might not be the solution that's right for them.
Thank you. That's a good segue. Chet, to a question I had for you. You guys have been very busy helping retailers build platforms to collect data and from various channels. What critical factors for success should investors be considering or asking management teams that are implementing these new systems?
So if you don't mind, I'd like to actually comment on the big data question, and then I'll answer it. I think big data is very hyped, and a lot of people talk about it, and I think the focus for the industry, no matter what vertical it's been, is to take all the data and put it in a data lake and actually have it. The problem is you collect all this data, you actually have to do something with it, right? And that's where not the data science part, but the data art part comes in, and a lot of companies are struggling with that and getting better and better at it. So I think we're going to see a lot of results. I think it's gone through the hype cycle, but I think we're going to see a lot of great things happen with big data in 2016 because everybody has now figured out a way to collect the data, and now they're making them actionable. So to answer the question you asked me, we think in the old world, people you would think about transacting and learning as two separate things. And with the amount of data that is coming in, you have to actually think about transacting, learning, and adapting in one cycle. So how do you do that? Well, I think what we're finding as investors, as you think about this, the questions to ask the management team is, are you delivering digital experiences to your customers? Because I think that's what the customers want. They are choosing to the retailer of choice or the airline of choice based on the experience they have in the interactions with that particular company. And so are you delivering the enterprise value directly to the customer in a way that they want to receive it? And if they are not, it is only a question of time. And it actually doesn't matter whether you're a retailer or whether you're Caterpillar or whether you're AT&T. It applies across all of them. And so that's something that we look at when we have a chance to work with customers. Is there a mandate at the board level to actually meet the customer and deliver a connected digital experience to them?
That's very helpful. Austin, Ziosk, as you described, is on a rocket ship, which it is pretty impressive the amount of growth you've had. Clearly, restaurants are investing in this tablet because there's a benefit. Give us some details around how restaurants are using the data they're collecting from these tablets to benefit their business.
Sure. And so I'll reflect on something Chet just said about having the essential nature of having a digital relationship with your guest. If you think about the seated dining world, in casual dining particularly, the guest is not coming to the restaurant often enough that they're going to download in any scale an app from that restaurant chain, because they're going, maybe once every 6 weeks, once every 3 months. It's not a Starbucks scenario where they're going every day. So that means that unless you put a device on the table, you have precisely zero opportunity to build a digital relationship with your guest. So one of the reasons we're growing so fast is we've come up with a business model that enables these restaurant chains to put a curated device to their brand that's for the guest benefit in front of the guest, and that then gives them a chance to build a relationship. And then this is where the data comes in. So I'm going to look specifically at the voice of the guest data. A typical restaurant pre-Ziosk, if they're lucky, will get about one guest per day to log on to the website and give them feedback in return for a free dessert. That's 30 per month. By the way, it's not even particularly good data. It comes typically from outliers. When you put a Ziosk on the table, somewhere between 80 and 90% of all your guests who pay with debit and credit will pay on the Ziosk, and about 70% of them will fill in the survey. You have a 70 to 100x increase in voice of the guest insight, and you have it immediately. So imagine you're a restaurant chain that just went from having no real voice of the customer feedback to real-time feedback from over half your guests. It's an opportunity to be transformational. Now you have to work out what to do with it. It comes back to Chet's point that just having all this data doesn't mean very much unless you work out how are you going to use that to influence the way that you operate the business. We look to make big data small as fast as we can. So, for example, out of that big data, we send about 100,000 reports a week to the restaurants. Every morning, first thing in the morning, the restaurant will get a report, for example, on what the guests felt about every single server yesterday, how that server's doing over time. This does not feel like big data to a restaurant manager. This feels like a revelation. So yeah, the connection to the guest, the feedback that they can give, it's the opportunity for transformation, and we're lucky enough to have some customers who are taking full advantage of that.
Thank you. Alexi, many investors are focused on traditional metrics when they evaluate a company's brand health or a concept's brand health, like same-store sales. I expect that as the data starts to grow, we're going to probably see metrics change. What metrics do you think investors should request from companies to really better assess the brand's health?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I think same-store sales is important. The problem with it is we find it somewhat of a lagging indicator of what's happening in a brick-and-mortar store. So, and if you look at it, and we think profit per square foot is sort of a useless indicator in many ways, because but that's the only thing that people were able to measure, right? You have your sales, and most of them have an idea of their profit, and what your square footage in a store is. So we look at it, the customers that come through your store is a much more important thing to focus on. So one of the things we talk about to customers is we look at the evolution of e-commerce. So if people use the Wayback Machine, you go back and look at what some of the e-commerce websites looked like a few years ago. If you look at the Macy's website from, I think, 1997 when it launched, or you look at the early Amazon websites, you look how difficult they were to shop and how complicated they were, the checkout process, what the conversion was, and then you look at them today and how they evolved and how seamless they are, and then you see what type of data people analyzed and looked at, and the data people look at every day in terms of visits, in terms of click-throughs, in terms of different things and how they use it. Then you walk through most of the doors of brick-and-mortar stores, they still look and feel the same. So we talk about big data. Talking about big data is I can echo what pretty much everybody said. The change to us is there's ways to capture all kinds of data now that wasn't possible before. So there are, you can put sensors in the stores. Like today, we can automatically capture every movement, almost every customer. We can automatically capture customer sales associates interacting. Retailers are putting in kiosks and other things which actually create new data and everything and stuff. For us, we are 100% focused on just helping retailers answer specific questions. So we're a technology company, but we don't start with the technology. We start with the questions and then try to find the technology. So the kind of things people look at now is, so for example, the most basic thing in many retailers, at least look at Starbucks, how many people walk past your store and how many of them you're capturing as a basic thing. Like, so it's amazing how many retailers don't even look at traffic. And part of the reason, but you'll want to look at like how many people walking by your store, how many coming in, how much time you spend there, and look at like we have some retailers that now live and die by dollars per kind of customer minute in the store. So you know how many people come in, you know how much time they spend, and you look at how much money you're making for, like how much you're getting out of the time people spending in your stores is a better resource to optimize than like square footage in your stores. You can look at engagement down to department. There's lots of different things. It does vary from a customer to customer, but we can tell you if there's no tools that are designed to capture like the more leading indicators, like are people walking into your store, are they just walking past it? Are people spending time in your store? Are they getting to the back of your store? Are they interacting with the merchandise? Are they making it to the fitting room for its apparel? If people are not measuring those things and focusing on optimizing like that experience along the path to purchase, they will not be successful with brick and mortar stores. Like restaurants are different because people like to go out to eat, but if you look at almost every other store, our view is that if you are a store and you compete based on your product availability, kind of product selection and price, you will eventually go out of business as a brick and mortar store. There's not a single category where you'll only differentiate, unless you somehow have a product that no one else can buy anywhere else, that you can compete that way. So you have to compete based on your in-store experience. And if you compete based on that, you need tools to help measure and optimize that. And the matrix that people should be looking at are around like that path to purchase of the store, because that's when you see, like you can predict that sales are going to go down a lot by looking at some of those other metrics. Hopefully that's helpful. But
no, that is.
Yeah,
that's very helpful.
So, yeah.
Josh, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, so at a very high level, what do you think is required to have a successful big data / digital experience? I know, Chet, earlier you mentioned you kind of need it to be elevated to the CEO or board level. Starting with the IT guy or the marketing guy, maybe that's not going to work. So as you look across your customer set, is that a requirement? What kind of buy-in do you need to actually make this happen?
I can talk about our customers, because when we started the business in 08, 09, and big data wasn't really a thing yet, but I think everybody here was working on analytics of some sorts. A typical feedback from a customer was, when we went and talked to retail executives, was we already have way too much data. We don't need more data. And that was a consistent, and they say, hey, we capture this data, we capture that data, we're not doing anything with that. And I think there's no, like, for a retailer, I don't think you can have a big data strategy per se. We have not seen it done successfully. You say we have a big data strategy. But it does, but you do want to define, like, here's the business questions, and if we answer those questions about store performance, e-commerce performance, those things, we're going to be able to do things better. And if you do that, and you start with that, and not all you can answer, but that has to be done that way to be successful. The other thing that we've seen that's very important, like big data actually can have a negative impact on the business. It can create a false sense of security, and you can lead you to many wrong conclusions sometimes if you don't use it well. And we don't think big data in our world replaces small data. We actually think, combine the kind of data we collect combined with surveys and intercepts and talking to customers is actually how you're going to do this successfully, and bringing the two together is pretty critical.
I have a personal view on this, which is in the way that we operate Zeos is we're trying to be, it starts with culture. So if the culture of the company, and that to me starts at the top of the company, if the culture of the company is very data-centric, then everybody has an expectation of data. So if you as a CEO run a company in a way which is people can get by with hyperbole and with making statements that aren't backed up by facts, you're not going to have a data-centric business. If you set up the culture of a company where for people to get things done, they actually have to be quantifiable wherever that's possible, then you've democratized data, and now the people in the company are going to demand, okay, what's the data that I require if I'm going to be able to optimize the way that I do my job? And certainly the way that we've gone about it is by trying to create a very data-centric culture, by having people all across the company who are now being very demanding of the underlying data infrastructure. Look, I need the metadata to be able to answer the following questions. That has driven us to the point where we're focused on data that makes sense to run the business, as opposed to Chet's view of there's this big lake of data. So to me, data culture is really, really important so that you're getting a pull as opposed to a push.
I think building on that, I think particularly in restaurants, what I see is that the cultural aspect, right, that Austin's talking about, where you've got, marketing is becoming, most of these technologies are finding their way into the marketing department. And more often than not, they're not particularly quantitative. They're a little bit afraid of technology. So beyond just embracing it, right, a lot of times they're actually resisting it. So, and when they do embrace it, they're embracing it for the, say, broadcasting capability of it, right? I can push my message out, not so much focus on, now what data do we get back so that we can refine that message, right? And that's an impediment in, I think, a lot of organizations, because if they don't fix that, right, and this is sort of getting to the small data, right? If you're not segmenting your messages, then when Beacon starts really taking off and these other kinds of micro-messaging tools, if you're not very specific and contextual about what that message is, what that offer is, it's going to make spam look like, an email from mom, It's, and this is on us, right? So the companies that aren't doing the little things aren't going to be able to do the big things.
I'll do this in two parts. What's happening today and what I think will happen in the future. I think we work with 25 out of the top 100 Fortune 100 companies, and if you had the CEOs of those companies here and asked them, have you invested in big data, the answer would be yes. If you ask them, did you get an ROI on it, the answer would be no, but we are looking forward to it, right? And so, and I think they're committed to it, because I think they will, over a period of time, they will get it. They've gone through the hype cycle, they've collected the data, and now they're going to make something with it. And what they're going to do with it, and the reason why they're hopeful is because it has to be actionable. You can take all this data and come up with all kinds of, hypothesis and this, but if it's not actionable, and I think our perspective and the reason I linked it back to digital experiences, we actually think that making it actionable at the point of interaction with the customer is the most important thing, to make it part of the digital experience. So when you go into a Burberry store, for example, and a sales associate at Burberry actually is using a clienteling app, they're actually not just using APIs, but they're actually using predictive analytics to look at how many things you've bought from Burberry and where you've come from, consent-based data that you've given them, so they can give you a recommendation right there and tell you this is what we think you should buy. So it has to be actionable, and it has to be actionable in a digital way, either directly through a sales associate or through an app that you're interacting with. So I think that's one from an experience point of view. But the second part is what is coming in the future. If we do not do this, if you do not do transact, learn, and adapt in real time, human beings will not be able to keep up, right? Because the amount of data coming at us from all these devices for enterprises is just, human beings cannot keep up today. I mean, I look at our server traffic, our support folks cannot keep up with it. So that is going to happen across the board. And for machines to start making some of those decisions, not just learn, but actually make those decisions, are going to be important. And I think the interaction point will always be an app over a period of time.
So I wanted to follow up on that, because the R in the ROI, right? We've been talking a lot about the investment and what it takes. I think it can show up in a lot of different ways.
Yes.
It could be marketing conversion, it could be operating efficiency. So could you maybe just give us a little bit of a sense of where that's coming from? And if you want to share any numbers or verticals and kind of reference cases, that would be great. So I'll just kind of open it up.
So we've maybe there are two examples I'll give. We've seen retailers actually see a top line benefit from this because of what they call it as mobile moments. They actually change the behavior of the app based on what you're currently doing and what you've done in the past. And that is this is how they use predictive analytics to make it happen. We call it insights. But that is actually happening at the top line. We actually have a payer, an insurance company, that is using predictive analytics to actually get better ratings. And so they have less churn as they go forward. So there are people who are using it in that aspect as well, and that's fairly automated. They get a list of people that are not tracking based on the star ratings that they're doing, and they create a list, and the call center actually calls folks and make sure that they have a good relationship so that they continue to get the ratings that they need so that they can collect the right amount of money from the government. So we see it happening mostly on the top line, but there's some other things that are happening on the efficiency side as well.
Yeah, I can give you a kind of classic example in the restaurant industry. I think for those of us who are in that industry, you know that historically when a restaurant has introduced a new food platform, if the marketing organization does a great job of describing it, taking nice pictures of it, putting it in the menu in a prominent place, if the wait staff has been well trained to introduce the new food platform, then it can sell very, very well. Now, it doesn't mean it was a great new meal. It just means you did a good job of packaging and selling it. Historically, you may have to wait 2 or 3 months to find out, well, did the guests who come back actually buy it a second time? Did they actually like it? And you may have already filled up your supply chain with all of the goods to service that platform. When you can poll all your customers in real time, it's the digital relationship that Chet's talking about. Our customers know the same day, did they actually like this or not? We have, advanced survey systems that will ask you questions based on what you ate, and they'll ask you specifically about the new food platform. And the CMO is going to know within 24 or 48 hours, okay, we may have described it right, but did it taste very good? That can transform the business performance of a restaurant, that kind of direct connection to guest insight.
Yeah, well, I mean, ROI on big data in retail stores is probably something I can talk about all day. But there's a few examples. The thing about a typical brick and mortar store is there's so much low-hanging fruit once you start measuring some of those things you haven't done in the past, where it's actually the ROI has been pretty phenomenal. I mean, there's some basic examples. If you understand in a certain size store, if you just understand where customers spend time and you do some pretty basic analytics to have a better predictive model about where you need to have stuff at what times, for a specialty store that's under 30,000 square feet, we have not seen a customer didn't get the 6 to 8% sales increase for a specialty store by doing that within about 9 to 12 months. Just understanding stuff. Store layout is a phenomenal opportunity where it's amazing how much stuff that people don't notice. I mean, there's a store down on Fifth Avenue where they open selling accessories where you used to have displays on the walls and displays on the floor selling the same merchandise. So from looking at sales, you don't know where the sales are coming from. And even when you ask people working in the store, where do you think most people shop, they somehow assume it's the displays on the floor because it's hard to kind of aggregate that information. Once you start looking, you can see people engage with the merchandise on the walls. The floor displays prevent them from getting one side to the other. Went from 3 to 2, those made them smaller. It was a 19% sales increase for that store. Sometimes we just see 2 displays around this different height, and people walk past one display and stop at the other one. I don't know, can engage you, move it. Similar kind of stuff done online, but we have not seen a store where you don't find things like that. Fitting room is an opportunity where people constantly talk about fitting room, but in some fairly self-service fitting rooms, just letting them know that the customer's in the fitting room and telling them when they need to allocate more staff because people visit fitting rooms, your sales will go up by a lot. There's lots of examples like that. Around personalization does work, and online I think a lot of people prove that. We bought a company a few months ago a startup, so one public example is Sears, maybe not the best example, but they're actually a big digital retailer. They send a lot of SMS campaigns that take you to a URL. People sign up, you get an SMS, you click, you go to URL. They started using this personalization engine that knows everything you've done last time, every click, every like, everything you know from the CRM to start making better recommendations when they go to that website. It improved conversion of taking those recommendations to the point of sale by 1,100% within less than 4 months. I mean, those data analytics of that sort does work if you use it correctly.
So we oftentimes our first step in the door with companies is in price optimization. So we do a lot of price optimization because as soon as a company is using demand-based and price elasticities to set prices instead of cost-based, competitive-based pricing, there's a very quantifiable return on that investment. And it more than pays for, say, the startup and the investment in the technology. Then everything that we start to layer on top of that ends up being being gravy. We also do test and control. So in terms of being able to help them to measure all the other initiatives, it becomes very quantifiable. So you start getting a self-funding program.
I think we have a couple of microphones in the audience. I don't know if there are any questions at this point from anybody.
Well, folks are queuing up. I'll ask a question of everyone. One thing that we've talked a lot about is digital DNA of a company. Everything from the talent to the hardware, the infrastructure that they need. When investors meet with management teams, I'll ask each one of you to give me one question they should ask the management team to assess the digital DNA of that company.
That's a great question.
Who wants to start? Chet?
Sure. We'll end up doing this a lot for our customers. And so we'll end up having a chance to talk to boards of companies, the C-suite. And so something a lot of companies are going through a transformation. If you had to ask one question, I would ask them, who is leading the digital transformation at the company? Assuming that they're not digital, and they're not digital natives, they're digital immigrants, and they're wanting to become digital. And there's no political jokes there, but so if they wanted to, who is leading it? And the wrong answer is if they say it is one individual. That is the wrong answer. The answer is all of us. Right? It is, yes, there's got to be one person who is responsible for driving it for the company. Could be, but if the CEO is not having this discussion with his board or her board, or they're not having the discussion in their team meetings, then it's not being driven correctly, because everybody needs to adopt it. This is not like implementing SAP.
Yeah.
Right? This is about the entire company shifting and making it happen.
Mine is coming at that from the same way. So my question is, how do you make decisions? I can tell very quickly based on how companies make decisions as to whether, it comes back to my point about culture, are they data-centric or not? And I'm not saying there's no room for art. There's a ton of room for art. But if you don't have the science, you're an idiot, because there's just too much science out there for you to take advantage of. Yeah? So how do you make decisions?
See, one thing, it's a difficult, I think, I'm not sure there's one silver bullet question that'll,
No, I just
tell
want
you
one from each of you.
So there's a couple things. One is, by the way, going back to previous questions about, for us, the projects are much more successful when they're not driven by the IT departments. And I think somewhat is unique to retail. And 99.9% of the time, we sell to head of store, CMO, and a few other people, or at the CEO level, and then IT gets involved very late, just purely from some of the implementation of other things, and that is the recipe for success. There's some exceptions. We've a few really good CIOs out there that actually go and do it, but generally it is not successful. The other thing I think that the difficult thing about brick and mortar retail, and part of the reason why everybody constantly, like when we were raising our first few rounds 8 years ago, everybody tells us you can, sell technology to retailers, they don't adopt it. It's like, no way. And I think there's a ton of examples of very promising technologies that should transform stores that have failed. And part of that is, like, the stores are very, complex and operationally very difficult to run. Like the example Chad talked about with Burberry with a tablet. Yeah, there's custom retailers that are doing it. But what's involved in rolling it out to thousands of stores? Like you take, as I think, like David Jaffe from Icena, presented here yesterday. You talked to him about these things. They have 70,000 associates. Most of them make $10 an hour. They turn over all the time across 5,000 plus stores. Training them to do anything, even if you make it very simple, rolling out tablets, doing it, implementing it is unbelievably difficult. Logistics around, like a lot of them say, hey, we can't even we don't even know, like if we run a promotion, if that inventory is in the store. Fixing that is difficult. And a lot of companies selling technology to retailers, historically, they're companies that know nothing about retail. They'll develop a technology for something else. And I'm not talking about infrastructure technology that will help you make stuff secure and scalable and those type of things. I'm talking about application level stuff. They'll develop something for something else and they say, there's a lot of stores out there, let's go sell this to retailers. And they'll come in and they know nothing about retailers, they don't understand. And they sell to a CIO. Generally, these are technology companies with CIO relationship. A company like I used to work for Cisco, we sell switches to the CIO, let's sell an application. And the CIOs tend to be very skeptical and risk averse, and for a good reason. There's a ton of money at stake in lots of processes, and it goes nowhere. And I think the difference today is, one is there is some real advances in technology around capturing data, around analytics, around how you do it, how you scale that, but also there are companies, and we certainly consider ourselves one of those, but there's many that, like we are, we have, about 100 plus software engineers that are working 100% on the technology, but we consider ourselves a retail company first and a technology company second. And we learned early we only have to do, we have a ton of retailers work for us, we do vertical by vertical, you have to focus on that. And I think that's the only way, frankly, to make it successful in the brick and mortar in a type of environment when you really kind of immerse yourself in understanding those challenges and build stuff that's not sort of like, there's lots of gimmicky stuff you can do in one store, but something you can scale. And and I think there's actually a lot of companies that are taking that approach now. And today they're able to get funding to do that. That wasn't the case a while back. So, yeah. But
I would ask some of the same questions that I ask, potential clients when I want to find out what solution is appropriate for them, right? Just simple questions about, looking at your last quarter, how much of your traffic change came from your marketing investment, right? When I look at your average spend, how much of that came from price, how much of it came from mix? And if they start squirming and they can't answer the simple questions, right, then they're not actually doing the measurement, right, that it requires to answer the tough questions.
Helpful. The marketing accountability, so the point Michael made earlier about how marketing don't like being accountable. In retail and brick and mortar, we've talked to a ton of them earlier where the last thing they want is data around the success of marketing campaigns. But I do think, because, there's a lot of marketing budgets in retail that are based on art. There's also, like, if you look at a lot of department stores, get a ton of marketing dollars from brands, their vendors, really on the myth. They themselves will tell you. So, like, disrupting that is not good. But the digital guys are used to measuring everything, and there is a lot of organizational changes where they combine digital and a lot of digital guys on top for marketing across, like, all channels and omni-channel guys retail. And I think that is driving a lot of change around analytics, around marketing and those things. So
I have two questions. First, as you look at individuals, I'd love to get your insights with regards to how are kind of individuals' acceptance and or concern around being tracked changing, given we are increasingly collecting data on just about everything these days. And then the second question is, in and around millennials, love to get any kind of data insights that you're collecting with regards to that group. It's been a topic that has come up often here. Thanks.
So I think in regards to people being tracked, one of the things that we found is that it tends to be very generational, right? Older generations are much more resistant to it, and you sort of get down in age groups, much more accepting. And the one thing that we keep finding is that if they sign up and they agree that that you can have their data, they want you to do something with it, right? And where they get ticked off is just like, okay, I signed up for this program and that program, and they're still sending me offers for things that I just don't want, right? So if you're going to have the data, then make sure that you're actually using it.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing. We find that if customers, like, we never talk about what we're doing is tracking for, I guess, obvious marketing reasons, but we talk about in-store analytics for us is about giving retailers tools to, in real time, listen and respond to their customers. It's like a real-time customer satisfaction survey. But if customers like the brand, trust the brand, and they see that something is improving based on the data, they actually will opt in and give more and more data. And if you're making it relevant, there's no question about it. But that is and there's actually very few, like all the surveys that rate different retailers on how well their brands are trusted, and a lot of them are actually pretty low, and that's the biggest issue. But if you're getting more and more relevant messages, like, you're actually going to opt into more and more campaigns and other things. So.
Yeah, so on this, we're finding, one of the things we've deployed on the platform is the ability to sign up for loyalty and sign in for loyalty, which in a sense is the customer going, hey, it's tracking in a different way, but it means that I'm going to announce that I'm here. We have found that by putting a device in front of the guest, you increase sign up by 10x plus, and you also enable sign in. So Brinker announced that Chili's has signed up 4 million people in the last 5 months, largely aided by the device on the table. They're getting about 16% of guests, and I wouldn't be allowed to share that data, but Wyman's announced it publicly. So they've got 16% of guests who are checking back in a scheme they've only just launched. That's pretty amazing for this particular industry. So I think it comes back to this point. If you give them something, then you'll get people to both identify themselves and give you tons of feedback. I would love to give you an answer on millennials,
but it's all anecdotal, and if I give you an anecdotal answer after what I've said, I'll look like an idiot. So,
see, we have, I mean, there is a lot of data on millennials. I actually personally don't believe there's, there's some people think they don't care about luxury. I don't believe that at all. I think that's more related to where they are in the income scale and other things, and I think some of the surveys show that the general trend of how shopping behavior is changing, and the more millennial-focused retailers, you see that more from the data. There's no question that, I mean, generally we find that traffic is, they're visiting less stores. I guarantee you, people, almost all of them, especially millennials, when they go into a mall, they will visit less stores than they did a year ago and then they did 2 years. We actually have a lot of malls in places like good cities and things where the mall traffic is, in many cases, up. We're measuring mall traffic, even though all the headlines that are down. Specialty retail, over 36 months of year-over-year, traffic is down. On a macro level, there's definitely big exceptions. And we see a ton of malls where mall traffic is up, every specialty retail is down. People used to come and visit 5 stores, will visit 2, 3 stores. Typical store, traffic is down, conversion is up, average ticket is up. You talk about people certainly come in and they know what they want to buy. They're much more researched. They do convert. They do spend more, but they visit a lot less stores. I mean, at least that's the only kind of, real true data we have from a brick and mortar shopping behavior.
Our perspective is a little similar. It's I think every time you see big data, whether it's for consent or anything else, you should think big action. Because if it's not actionable, then neither the enterprise nor the end user wins. And so that's the point that Michael made earlier, which is if somebody's going to give you consent, make sure you use it, right? And you make it actionable for them, and make sure you are actually using all different technologies to give them something that's personalized for their need.
I think we're pretty close on time. I just want to ask one last one quickly to the panelists. So it seems like we're at the peak of this hype cycle for big data, and it's going to settle down. But if you think out 2 to 3 years, right, what's some off-consensus, bold prediction that could happen, whether it's a technology-related thing, beacons, or maybe the benefit showing up in some unexpected pocket? Just as you look out, with your guys over the next couple of years, what do you think that could happen that would be game-changing? Whoever wants to start.
I mean, I think in restaurants, actually in brick and mortar in general, we're experiencing the internet revolution for the first time, right? So you think back to really 91, 92, right, for all other retailers, because now all of a sudden the internet is coming to them, right? And there's new technologies that people are just trying to figure out what to do with them. I think beacon technology and this type of very localized messaging, that's really going to change the whole equation.
Alexi,
I can
go.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think beacons have a lot of great applications. I don't think that's. I think most people selling beacons don't know what those applications are today, and I think there's actually a lot of interesting experimentation. I think the beacon use cases are going to be that are going to be really revolutionary. Going to be on a more micro level, specific stores we've seen, and a slightly different from a lot of the use cases people talk about now with sending messages as you're walking past the stores and those type of things. And we don't have time to talk about specific examples. I do think in general, I think the store, and it's hard to say is one thing, but the store, my view, the experience in the store, every type of store will be dramatically different within 5 to 10 years and 15 and important. And it's similar to the way, you look at the way you used your phone in the 90s, like a flip phone, and the way you use your phone today, it'll be a similar type of change. But it will be very different depending on the retailer. We've seen in apparel, in cosmetics, and Fuse, some of the concepts and experimentation that's leading in that direction, but I think the experience will be completely different. There are apparel stores which are almost entirely going to be dedicated to fitting rooms, and you can do everything there, and when you come in, everything based on knowing who you are, recognize you, people bring in your clothes, you check out there, you walk out, there's cosmetics, experience and different things, and I think that and I think data is not the only thing, but ability to capture, analyze data, and use it in real time at the time of interaction with the customer is the big part that's driving that change.
I think the reason we're all hesitating is because the really good ideas aren't getting shared up here, sorry. We've all got some pretty big ideas, I'm sure. I think for us, we see a scenario where there's a device in most of the seated dining environments that we are currently aspiring to fill up with our experiences that most guests will sign in, and that they will get a highly personalized experience as a result of that. Everything we're doing from an architecture, data, content management is all leading to the potential for the same personalized experience you have online today, you actually can have in a physical environment. Yeah.
I think our take, and I think this will happen in the next 3 years, I think there are 2 words, personalized and predictive. Every technology out there is going to get personalized. Even your apps that you have are going to be personalized, and they're going to be predictive based on what you're doing at that particular moment.
Great. Well, I think that's all the time we have. So thank you, everybody, and thank you, panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.